are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy, indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is episode number 37. 37, Justin. It's going fast, I feel like. Yeah. Or is it going slow? I can't really tell.
I don't know, man. I feel like every other day I turn around, you're saying, what's the next coffee call? Who's our next guest? Like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, man, didn't we just do this yesterday?
Exactly. I feel like that's all we do is podcasts at night now.
Yeah, that's okay. I can handle it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You know, and today's guest is another good one, and we've got Jared Mills, you know, one of your coworkers from Midwest Whitetail.
Yep, yeah, and it's a topic that, you know, I think if you have listened to the last couple weeks about pressure and access and everything else we've talked about, you know, Jared's somebody that knows, you know, he's doing something. It's not, I wouldn't say it's different, but he's hunting a different kind of way. It's a little bit different style, I guess. And, you know, taking into consideration all those factors we've talked about in the past, pressure and access, you know, and scouting and all that. You know, you and I have watched Midwest Whitetail coming through college because it's always been free. But I am lucky enough to be working for them now. But, you know, Jared has always been a hang and hunt kind of guy. So that's what we're going to dive into today is, you know, what pushed him into using this style to hunt, because he's obviously had some pretty great, you know, proven long-term success doing this.
Yeah, and the reason why, you know, coming from me, the reason why I wanted to get into the hang and hunt topic, and especially with him, is because, like you said, he's proven successful doing it, and he's been doing it for, I don't know, probably 10 years or so now.
Yeah.
But it is a new thing, new hip thing in the industry right now, in the hunting world, the mobile hang and hunt. But he's kind of been doing it, you know, for a while before guys even, you know, you heard of the hang and hunt. And, you know, to kind of come back to what you were saying about the last couple podcasts we put out with the pressure and access and everything we've been talking about, if you dive in a little deeper as far as like pressure, you know, Jared isn't putting any more pressure on his farm hanging stands. You know, he knows where he wants to get. He scouts it from either afar or from a map. And then the only pressure he's got is cameras, if he's running cameras. He just goes in there when he wants to go in to kill. He sets a stand up, and I'll tell you what, he has killed some giants doing that.
Yeah, yes. And it's, you know, it's that versatility, I think, that allows you to get in there, kind of assess the situation, you know. And I think you're going to probably hear him say that, you know, most of the success on these hanging hunts happens on the first, if not the second sit. So it's about going in and making the adjustments that you may need to make, you know, moving. It might just be 10 yards, might be 50 yards, but, you know, when you're bow hunting, those are those minute details that pay off, you know, dividends, you know, and can define your season. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that I think the mobility and just the overall effectiveness that he has had doing this, I mean, like you said, he's killed some giants. So, I mean, it speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I'm ready to dive into this with him and really get down to the nitty-gritty. But first, and I haven't really told you yet, but I've got an announcement to make, and that is the Fall Podcast has just now partnered up with America's Best Bowstrings.
Officially.
We are officially partnered up with America's Best Bowstrings, which is awesome because America's Best, they're out of Ohio, and they are a pretty small company, but I feel like they're at the forefront of the bowstring industry, basically. They are in the upper echelon of bowstrings out there, in my opinion, and you know, the guys over there, Bryant and Tim and Jerry, they're all awesome guys. I got to meet them. We did a podcast with them, but I'm super excited to shoot their strings this year. And I know you've been shooting, you know, their strings for a couple years now.
Yeah, I have. You know, I had them on my bows before I got to Midwest Whitetail, and you know, if anybody watches Midwest Whitetail, you know that they're one of our partners as well. And relatively new partner to us, but, even though I'm still new to the team here, I've heard nothing but great things about ABB and the product in general. It's an American-made product from a small shop, in the Midwest, and I mean, I know that alone is a good reason. It gives people a good reason to want to spend their money on it, knowing that it's made right here. And secondly, it's just an awesome product. I mean, you can get a little more speed out of your bow, the durability of them, the cool color options that they have, and just it's a good quality product. And I mean, I think everybody wants to put good stuff on their bows. I mean, it just gives you that confidence. And if you can shoot better with something, then why not use it? And that's
exactly,
like I said, I used them before I got here, but can't say enough good about them.
Yeah, and one of the cool things is a lot of people like to customize their bows, in this industry that it's so manly and down and deep and dirty and, and tough and everything. A lot of these guys like to customize their bow, and I'm one of them. I like to have a certain color, and I like to have it all, matching, and
Yep.
they have an assortment of colors on their strings that you can either do twist, you can change the serving color. And now they just announced that they have customizable colors on the heat shrink, which is really cool. So the sky's the limit with these things, man, and they're just awesome to talk to. If anybody's in the market for a string, I highly recommend going to America's Best and trying them out. Their website is americasbestbowstrings.com, or
Yep.
you can even get on there and give them a call. They're really good guys to talk to, and tell them that Aaron and Justin from the Fall Podcast sent you.
Yeah, and we actually gave one away a couple weeks ago now, so
Yeah.
I got a feeling it's probably not the last one of those we're going to do.
No. We've got some stuff in the works, and I'm excited to get it out there to everybody and get it going for sure.
Awesome, that's great news.
Yeah.
With that being said, I think we need to get Jared on the phone here.
Yeah, let's get him on here and start this conversation. All right, on the phone with us today is Jared Mills from Midwest Whitetail. Jared, how you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good. Justin brought to my attention that we should get you on the podcast here, and I thought it was a great idea. I've been watching a lot of your guys' Midwest Whitetail for a lot of years now, and I kind of came up on it because it was you guys were really the pioneer of the web show and digital, and you're really the leaders in the forefront in my eyes. And I just love watching what you guys are doing in the semi-live. So I really like seeing the season as it unfolds in the season, and nobody's really doing that. I mean, you get a lot of guys that are just freelance doing it, but nobody with the magnitude that you guys are at and the level you're at, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, we appreciate that. It's a lot of work, and Justin's got his first taste of how much work it is. He knows how many sleepless nights he had this fall, but it's cool to see the response from people and hear exactly what you just said. It's real, it's relatable. They can see what's going on almost in real time, and like I said, it's a ton of work, but it's cool to see the response. And I appreciate you having me. This should be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And, today I'd really like to cover something that I feel like, and even Justin vouched for you as well, is something that I've seen you do a lot, and it's the hang and hunt, or the hang and bang, like I like to call it. And you're really successful at doing it, and I really kind of want to dive deep into that and basically your system and how you do it all.
Yeah, I love hanging hunts. Well, let me back up. I don't love doing them. It's a ton of work, but I love the results.
Yeah.
It kind of speaks for themselves, and we can get into why I think it works, or at least from my experience, how it has worked.
Cool. And I kind of got a little ahead of myself. I'd like to actually have you introduce yourself. I said you work for Midwest Whitetail. Can you tell us what you do with Midwest Whitetail and maybe how long you've been there?
Yeah, so I'm currently, if you put a title on it, I guess business manager. I kind of oversee the production of everything we do, and of course contribute content. I just came back to full time with Midwest Whitetail a year and a half ago now. But I've been with Midwest Whitetail since 2010. Bill hired me as an intern straight out of college, and so I worked full time for Midwest Whitetail for about a year and a half back then. Went and did some other things, worked for Muddy Outdoors, did some other sales roles, and then eventually full circle came back to doing this full time. It just, I got to the point where I just wanted to get back to being able to hunt a lot. I was tired of using all 14 days of my vacation time in sales roles, allotting it to the fall and not having leftover time. So I just needed something that allowed me to get in the woods more, and this made sense.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of fought myself with. I went to college for television and digital media productions, and I was like, I'd like to be in the hunting industry because I love to hunt and everything. Well, you don't get a lot of time to hunt when you're being a field producer and editor, but you're still out there doing everything. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. So,
yep.
Well, cool. I'd like to start from the top kind of here and ask you what experiences did you have that made you want to do the hanging hunts instead of the preset pre-hung kind of stands like everybody's the norm of doing basically.
Yeah, as I try to think back when I started doing this, honestly I think it happened by mistake. It wasn't like I was looking at it strategically. It was more that I didn't have enough tree stands to put up different spots. I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on tree stands. I just bought one mobile set and thought this would be just fine. It's not that hard to hang and hunt, and that's when I kind of stumbled on how effective it was. But it wasn't when I started doing it. I didn't know what the concept of hanging and hunting even was. I just happened to start doing it. And then once I got into filming and having a cameraman with me, I was already hanging at least one stand anyway for the cameraman. So it wasn't that much harder to add a second one. So, a couple of things right there kind of led to figuring out how effective it was. And every single year, it's just kind of evolved from there into, I would say, this past season, upwards, probably more than 90% of my hunts were hanging hunts. Very, very few was I go into a preset stand. And some of that is because of hunting new properties, but a lot of it is just because I truly believe in the effectiveness of it.
So when you go into a year, do you have a set amount of, stands that you like to preset or pre-hang? And, do you have special areas that year after year those deliver? So instead of doing a hang and hunt, you can get in there maybe a little more aggressive on the edge of some bedding or food. Do you have any of that instance when you're going into the year?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I've had some turnover of farms recently as far as gaining permission. So that obviously takes that away. But farms I have hunted for a while, I do have preset stands. It's more or less that I just didn't want to go through the work of taking them down. I knew they're in a good spot. But typically on those farms, I target individual deer, and a lot of times those stands will go unhunted the entire season or for multiple seasons just because the deer I'm hunting isn't cored up there. But I know it's in a good spot in general to see deer, just not the deer I'm particularly targeting. So I do have preset stands. They just don't tend to get hunted quite a bit.
Yeah, and, I guess what kind of brought this on to me with the hang and hunt is I've been fighting with myself. I really want to be somewhat mobile and do a hang and hunt. I really don't feel like I have the right stand for it. It's one of those new fads that everybody's like going mobile now and saddle hunting and doing the hang and hunt thing. But, Lone Wolf just came out with some more new hang and hunt systems that are, pertain to hang and hunting.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing that I'm fighting with myself on is I'm really crazy about the noise. I just feel like I'm going to, sound like a herd of cattle coming in and this, sweating and everything and trying to hang two stands. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's my biggest thing. And how do you combat that? Like the noise and, with another guy, cameraman, and trying to hang two stands as well.
The second person is key there. One, you can distribute who carries what, but you're already making a lot of noise with two people. There's just no way around that.
Yep.
And carrying two stands on top of it really doesn't add that much in my opinion. But I'm not going to say those aren't negative. Those are huge negatives for hanging and hunting. It's a trade-off that I've battled myself. But ultimately the effectiveness of it has kind of trumped those things that you just mentioned, the noise and sweating going in and I will say I have had some experiences where I think that extra noise somehow helped us, and we've had bucks come in literally minutes after getting fully set up. They're curious. They come to check those things out. As long as you're smart with wind direction and stuff coming in, a little bit of noise I don't think bothers. And even lights and stuff. I've done quite a bit of hanging hunts in the dark in the mornings, and I've never been scared to shine flashlights trying to find the right tree or get around branches or whatever it is. I think that stuff does more damage in our mind than it actually does on the hunt.
Yep. I totally understand and get that, because it's one of those things that, like, when you come up in hunting and you evolve as a young hunter and move into, what we are now as adults and everything, I think a lot of the social media now, but like magazines and everything you read and see and hear is that deer they don't like you said, don't like flashlights, and and they don't like, their nose is one thing. Their nose is their biggest defense.
Right.
But, we get a lot of these thoughts in our mind, like deer. We've talked about it before, about how a lot of people say, deer at 6, 7, 8 years old are going to go from a 180 to a 100-inch deer. And, yeah, a lot of deer probably do that. But I think we get these thoughts in our head that, this is the equation. This is what happens every year to every deer, and it's not so much that, if that makes sense. I'm kind of rambling there, but, like you were saying with the flashlight, it probably doesn't bother them that much at all, honestly.
Yeah, and especially if you're in the timber, if you've ever stood a few hundred yards away from a guy using a light, it's so hard to pick up. You might catch a little glimpse of it here or there, but it really doesn't carry that far. And then with the noise factor, there's always all kinds of noises out there. It's something that they live with. You think about just even some of the loud ones that you think would scare a deer, hedge balls falling, and how loud are those? And it never bothers deer. I've watched, their reaction to that, and branches falling and whatever. There's a lot of noises that I think it just doesn't do as much damage as we think it does.
Oh, I would say that, to add to that, in considering your strategy when you're going in for that particular hunt, if you're hunting the timber in the morning trying to catch deer coming back from a food source at night, you're not blazing through a bedding area, blowing every deer out of there. You're trying to get to them before they get back.
Right.
And conversely, if you were to be hunting a deer that you were in close quarters with, you're going to proceed with even more caution and maybe even opt out to leave that second guy out and just make it a solo mission. But just a matter of what the situation is. Sure.
Now, Jared, when you go in, are you using like a red light or green light or just a normal flashlight?
All three. I'll use a normal flashlight when I need the extra light. If I don't need that much light, if I just need a little bit to help guide, my steps of not stepping on stuff, it'll be red or green depending on which one I have with me that day. I have, multiple headlamps that I keep in my pack, and but I really have not experienced, in my experience, it hasn't made a difference. It's just if I need more light, I'll use a white one. If not, I'll use red or green.
Gotcha. And, when you go in to do, let's say it's a morning, and you're going to go in and do a hang and hunt, are you approaching that any differently than you would, let's say, if you're going to a set stand that you've already, a pre-hung stand that you've already had up?
Yeah, I leave a lot earlier, first of all, because I spend so much time trying to find the right tree. I mean, you guys, any hunter really knows how hard that is. That's sometimes the biggest battle. And I'll likely go into areas that I haven't been to before. It's starting from an aerial map and looking, thinking there's got to be a good tree here somewhere. But, I'm picking 100-yard circles or something where I want to be, maybe 50, maybe a little smaller, but I'm definitely not picking the particular tree I want to be in. So I got to give myself some time to find that, and then you guys know how much extra time it takes to hang sticks and 2 stands and camera equipment. So,
oh, yeah. Yep.
That's the biggest difference is time, I would say. No change as far as how I access. Still got to be cautious with the wind and where you're leaving ground scent and all that stuff.
Now, when you're entering the woods in the morning, let's say you get to the stand or get to the tree that you want, or maybe you just can't find that tree, so you've started with the aerial photo, and you're like, I want to get in this area. I mean, there's had to been numerous times where you've just fought with yourself, like, man, I really want to get in that tree, but it's not big enough. Or, have you had to settle for a, more than not situation when you go in the morning?
Yeah, two things. I'll either settle for less than ideal tree, or I'll wait till it gets a little lighter and I can see further without tromping all around with the flashlight and leaving scent everywhere. I'll just wait till it gets a little lighter and I can glass a better tree and make the move then. But you're exactly right. I've found myself in that situation multiple times.
And are you trimming at all? Trimming any lanes, or are you trying to pick more of a bare tree? I mean, you're a guy that likes a lot of cover up front or back cover, or what's your situation there?
Yeah, ideally, the cover, but there's a trade-off because you don't know what the trees around you are going to look like. Usually, the issue is not usually the tree that you're in. It's nearby trees as far as your shooting lanes. So I would prefer a tree, especially with two people in it. I don't like being in a bare tree. There's just too much movement going on up there, so I prefer a tree that has some cover. But I have found myself when it starts getting light, we spend all this time setting up, find a good tree, waiting for it to get light, and it gets light and you realize you have no shooting lanes, or very, very few. And I've had those hunts before, and it's unfortunate, but it's kind of part of the game when you're going in blind like that.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is, I'd add that even with all those trade-offs that he's talking about, not knowing exactly what tree you're looking for, or else being very particular. And I didn't spend a lot of time with you this year, but kind of the horror stories I've heard amongst the office that Jared Mills spends more time looking for the tree that he's going to hunt out of than it takes to get it set.
That's true.
But, like going back to what I was saying, all those trade-offs to me are contributing factors to the success of these hanging hunts, because, you're in a new spot every time, and the deer doesn't know to look in those spots like they would if you're hunting the same stand every time you go out. And, it's just, to me, it makes sense that those are, important and very contributing factors to the success you have in there. And even if you don't kill, like the encounters you get, and knowing that like you're in the bedroom or you're in a different spot on that trail, either to or from the food or bedding or whatever the case may be, you're someplace different that the deer doesn't expect to encounter danger or hasn't encountered danger there in the past.
Yeah, I think that leads us to why I believe hanging hunting is so effective. And it's, earlier I said I don't think we do as much damage as we think we do with noise and like flashlights and stuff. I do think we do more damage than we realize just from being at the tree. I think even if we don't see a deer during that hunt, the next or later that night or the next morning or whatever deer walks by later, I think our scent lingers, our sign lingers. I think deer adjust to that more than we think, and having the element of surprise on your side, like Justin was talking about, I think is huge. And I truly believe that has been effective on a lot of my hunts, on a lot of my buck harvests, is having that element of surprise, either first time in or maybe the second time in, but not many more times than that. I truly think your effectiveness falls off, and the main reason is because we do more damage than we know of when we're there. Even if we don't think we got spotted or smelled or anything during the hunt, you don't know what happens after you leave.
Right, and that's a great point because, like I alluded to earlier, I think we weren't recording at the time, but Justin and I were talking about it last week with pressure on your farm. And this year I kind of took a step back. I keep a journal every year of like all my sets and what happens and what deer I see and everything. And I was kind of going through that journal and recap. And over the last, I think it's been 4 years, I've killed some pretty good bucks, and a couple in Missouri and a couple here in Michigan, all with a bow. And every one of them, it kind of was a light bulb moment. It kind of told me like I need to dive deeper into this, but all of them were on the first time in, and two of them were on hanging hunts in the evenings, and that was more particular that was more towards I needed to be in that area, but the wind was wrong for days, and I knew I couldn't push in until I had that wind, and I finally got that wind. I went in there and killed that night. Now, that told me something. I'm like, maybe I should look farther into this. But then I've got that little guy on the shoulder still. It says, wait a second, like, it's going to be more time. You're going to be loud. You're going to, and I'm like trying to find a happy medium here. But all the upper echelon bucks that I've killed have been on first time in sits, whether they've been pre-hung or hang and hunt, basically.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence. I've seen that and heard that so many times. Obviously I've seen it in my own hunts, but it truly is a trade-off because it's so much harder doing a hang and hunt every single time. And like you said, more time, more effort, more noise, all that stuff, but there's no denying that it works. There's so many stories across the board of first time in success.
I mean, that was me this whole year. My first season in Iowa, and I was hunting public ground all year. I hunted private the last 3 days of this late muzzleloader that's now over, but every minute I put in this year was on public ground, and there was one time I think they got skunked. Every other time I went out, I was passing bucks that were in range.
And you're almost in a different spot every time too.
Yeah, I only hunted the same spot twice, like one time. I hunted the same tree twice the 2 days before I killed. Saw what they were doing, and I moved in close, and I killed on the ground, but I hunted 4 different sections of public ground in southern Iowa, and the first day I went out, it was like October 18th, I think.
Yeah.
And me and Cooper encountered that really nice 2-year-old and had him at 10 yards making a scrape. Like, it was just a cool hunt, and that was successful to me. I chose not to kill him because I recognized how young he was and the potential he had, but to go in there, pick the spot, like you said, based on a map, put a plan together, find that tree, and just go where everybody else isn't going. And that's different, I think, on public land, but because you are competing with so many other people. But at the end of the day, like, you're applying the same principles to the same animal, and you get the same results. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah. And another thing you touched on that just popped in my head, it doesn't have to be a huge adjustment. We talk about these hanging hunts and adjusting to what you see, and the deer adjust, but the deer aren't adjusting dramatically either. So even a 50-yard move here or there makes a huge difference. That's the difference between a deer being in a bow range and a deer going out of bow range because of what they experience there. The damage you do does damage on that tree, but a simple little adjustment can make all the difference in the world, and that's kind of what you did on your kill. Yeah,
I think I made about a 60 or 70-yard adjustment. And like you said, some deer come in on you during the setup or right after you're done. That day I rattled from the ground, and while I was getting my tripod set up, before I even started rattling, I had a young buck come in on me before I was recording. He came in at 10 yards, blew, and he ran off. So I just sat there for 15 more minutes and then moved further into that drainage. I ended up killing like 30 yards from where I had that first encounter, but 70 yards from where I had seen him the previous 2 days.
Yeah, and sometimes it's coincidence, but even that noise thing, that deer are curious creatures. Even as long as you're not banging metal and stuff together, if it's the natural noises, so many times they come and check it out while you're hanging the stand. It's kind of amazing.
Speaking of banging metal, are you taking any precautions of, putting any, tape on it, or, a lot of guys do the silent, I can't remember what they're called, like silent strips or silent tape. Are you doing anything of that nature to your sticks or stand just to stay that much more quiet?
I'm not, but I should. I still cringe every time I accidentally bang something together and thinking that I just messed up my hunt, but it never really does. It's more just me, but I haven't personally tried anything like that. Not that I'm against it, I just haven't done it.
Okay.
One thing I cover up is the tree arm. Like, I use that wrap, like that camo wrap you can buy at Cabela's or wherever, but it's the same stuff they put on your arm at the hospital or when you donate blood. I just get the black or the camo, and because when you're standing up there, like, those buckles on your harness that are coming across your thighs, if you have the right setup, you're usually right there hip height with the tree arm, and those are the ones that...
Self-filming, it's always my release that hits that.
Yeah.
Release is what hits my camera arm.
I do the same thing with my camera arm, like everything, my fluid head. I mean, I'm just anal about noise, and especially when I'm filming, like, that hunter's there hunting. You should, me as a producer, I feel like even when I'm getting filmed, like, I want somebody to act like, you're one guy, not two. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody says it's double the scent, double the noise and everything. So when I'm filming, I'm trying to be, out of sight, out of mind, basically. And I don't want the hunter, whoever I'm filming, to have to worry about me, worry if I'm going to hit record, worry if I'm going to be focused or even loud, so.
Yeah. And that goes to another point. Like, the three of us, we've all heard horror stories about people who get these camera guys that, they're phenomenal on a camera. They take great pictures. They can lay down the storyline, but they're not hunters, and they're just not aware of, what's going on in that play-by-play moment. And it's one of those trade-offs again, where if you're at the mercy of somebody you don't know or you're not familiar with working with,
yep.
Do you want the guy who's going to nail the footage but not be in the hunt, or do you want the guy who's in the hunt that you might be able to coach through the footage?
Yeah, and even going a little bit deeper than that, just you want guys that hunt like you in general.
Exactly.
Even strategically, believe in the same strategies and things that you do, because it's the little stuff that matters. It's how precautious you are doing certain things. Even all of us can admit that. November 1st, we're probably a little more cautious than we are on November 21st. You get burned out, and that's kind of the same feeling that a cameraman that doesn't agree with your hunting strategies or wants to do something different, they're just not going to do the little things right, and all that stuff adds up.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more, man. Like, we were in an instance this year, Casey and I had a real big deer. I mean, he was touching for sure 190, could be 200. He was at 28 yards. And, it literally, you could hear a pin drop. And it's one of those things that both of you have to be dialed. You have to be, it's, even with the camera, you got to act like you're the one killing the deer as well.
Yep.
And it takes, not, I shouldn't say a special person, but I agree 100% with you. You have to have someone that, believes the same way you do and takes the same steps as you do, even walking or entering a stand, or and it takes a while to get someone that films you or you film with to gel with. I know Casey and I, for the first year, it was a learning curve. I had to learn how he did things, and really how I do things just didn't really matter. You have to adapt as a cameraman to who you're filming as well, and you might have to tweak some things, and it's one of those things, you'll learn it, and once you do, it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I've seen guys go through different cameramen and filming partners and all that just for that reason. You just don't hunt similarly, and again, I have a long list of my pet peeves when it comes to cameramen and what I think they should do, and sometimes it's just me being too obsessive about stuff. But when you find someone that hunts like you and you're invested in their success as much as they are yours, it really works well.
Yep. And not to get too far off the beaten path like we have already, but last year, it wouldn't be the season we're coming off right now, but the year before, we were in Kansas. Casey and I were in Kansas. We've been hunting our butt off. We've been hunting Iowa. He took him 4 years to draw the tag, and we spent like 25 days in Iowa, and then we went over to our lease in Kansas to change it up a little bit. And like first or second night in the stand, there was this deer. We were hunting big deer. He's like right at 170, 175, somewhere in there. Just mature deer, and Casey went into blind rattle, and he rattles, and this deer comes in, I mean, hot. He is coming in now, and he's coming in on my side of the tree. But I can't, we're in thick timber, and it's hard to see, and he came and stopped at like 15 yards in the brush. And, of course, my camera's facing away from him, and I've got to wheel around so the deer's coming in, it would be in front of my stand, but I'm facing the tree. And that was mistake number one on my part. So I'm trying to tell him that there's a deer behind us, and it's the deer that we're trying to kill. And I'm trying to move, and the deer busted me. The first time I've ever had a deer bust me in the stand, and he didn't freak out, but he knew something was up, and he was on his way in. I mean, to give us a chip shot, and he just kind of turned around and he walked off. It took him, a good 3-4 minutes to walk off. Never blew, but he knew something was up, and I was so mad at myself. You would have thought I missed the biggest deer in my life hunting, and I just took it so hard because it goes back to what I told myself from day one. You have to be on the ball at all times. You have to be. It doesn't matter. I got caught with my pants around my ankles, and it cost us. And I still to this day I think about it, and I'm like, and I had to edit the hunt too, and I'm like, gosh dang it, I'm reliving this thing now, and it's like, it just, it's one of those things you have to be on the ball every step of the way. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, back to our normal or our initial conversation here. I do wanted to ask you a question about, let's say you go in the morning and you do a hang and hunt. Regardless of, maybe you had a good morning or a bad morning, but you just like the area. Do you leave the stand up and then hunt it that night a lot of times, or are you taking it down, rehanging it, or adjusting all the time?
I have left them in there before to come hunt, like, a few days later or something. Not very often if I come back in the afternoon. If I'm gonna hunt it the afternoon, I'm just gonna stay in. I'm not gonna get down and then get back in. I think that you're just doing more unnecessary damage, leaving more ground scent stuff by going out and coming back in. But if I have a spot that I really like, I will leave a stand there for sure for a future hunt.
Okay. That was one of my biggest things was, a lot of times hunting all day, it's kind of got to be a special scenario. You know what I mean? Like, you don't just, a lot of people don't go in and just hunt all day, all the time. So I didn't know if it was one of those things, if you go in and you're like, just really like the spot, if you're just leaving it hung, or you actually get, taking it down, then rehanging it that night, or how you did that.
Yeah, if I have an extra stand to work with, which isn't always the case, I will leave one in there if I know it's in a good spot and I expect that I could potentially hunt it in coming days or weeks.
Okay. And how early are you getting in, whether it be a morning or a night? Like, let's say when you go hunt a pre-hung, maybe in the morning you want to be in an hour before crack of day. That's when you want to be set, ready to go. I don't know if that's true or not, but how much time are you giving yourself to get that stand hung?
Let me think. I usually shoot for, and my goal is a lot different than reality sometimes because it always takes longer than I think, but my goal is to be completely set up, letting things settle half hour before legal shooting light, which would be an hour before sunrise. So I would say I usually give myself, depending on the spot, of course, but a good hour from the time I arrive at the property until I want to have everything fully settled. I usually can't get it done in less than an hour, including walking in and setting stands and then setting everything up in the tree after that.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, this year I was trying to get in. I like to be in setting, just breathing, in the tree, everything ready, an hour before, light starting to crack. And here in Michigan, I do a lot of hunting here, and it's very, really highly pressured, and if you always feel like you're walking on eggshells, and it's like, man, you just take every step tiptoeing around and everything. And I just feel like, not even just in Michigan, but it does help here, but just getting in early and letting everything just settle back down. And, like you said, deer get curious about hearing noises, and unless it's metal, cracking together or something, but rustling the leaves, they get curious about that. So I actually had that instance this year going in the morning. It was a pre-hung set, but I bumped a doe. I bumped her, and she just ran like probably 40 yards and just stopped. And I could hear her, just kind of milling around and everything. She didn't blow. And I just kind of, as I could hear her walking, I would start walking because I was kind of paralleling her. And I got into my stand, and next thing you know, crack of day it comes, and she walks right underneath me. Had no clue I was there, and I just felt like that extra time that I gave it really helped me out in that instance.
Yeah, I think deer can get settled down fairly quickly as long as there's not repeated noises. You watch a deer just in its natural environment, and there's a noise. Its ears perk up for a little bit, and it sits really still, trying to listen for the second noise, so they can confirm location. If that never happens, they go back to just complete normal, relaxed state. And I think that's important once you get set up, to give yourself some time for everything to settle down.
Yep. And a lot of guys, a lot of mobile and hang and hunt guys, they're really particular on their gear. The weight is a big thing in the mobile hunting now. With your gear, what gear are you using, and what are the steps that you're taking? What's your pet peeves? Do you want to be as light as you can be, or does it not matter to you? And is it just functionality? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, and I may not be in a situation that all guys are in, because I always have almost always have a cameraman with me. I'm not solo hunting as much as I used to, so having an extra person to carry a stack of sticks or an extra stand makes a big difference. So I don't think I place as much emphasis on weight. I just want quickness and ease of setting up. That's really what I look for. And when I first started doing hanging hunts, I was using the muddy stuff, sticks and stands, and those worked well. And then kind of evolved and switched into the lone wolf stuff, and that's what I'm currently using. But I've seen some of the other products out there. I think there's a lot of good options. I'm not necessarily a proponent of one is way better than all the others. I think there's a lot of options depending on if guys are more weight guys or ease of use guys. For me, it's the ease of use and how quick can I get up the tree.
Yeah, quick and quiet and efficient. I was thinking you're probably going to head that way. I didn't know, would that change at all for you if you were going in by yourself? Would you be more anal about, weight if you had to do it all yourself, or are you still going to go towards the ease of use?
I would probably lean a little bit more towards the weight, but I still think ease of use trumps it. If something's really light, that's great. But if it takes you an extra 20 minutes to set up, then it kind of cancels out the point of it. I carry enough stuff in with camera gear and all that I don't know that extra weight makes all that much of a difference. It's a bear either way, it seems like.
Yep. So, let's say, for instance, you are going in by yourself, and when you get to the tree, what is your process getting up the tree? How many sticks do you have? Are you using kind of like rapid rails? Are you using sticks that you put together? Like, how many of those you're using, and what's your process from the base of the tree to get the tree or get the stand hung?
Yeah, I think the important thing to start with is making sure that you have. I usually try to put a stick on each side of my safety harness, kind of hanging off of there, so I can put the first stick around the base of the tree while I'm standing on the ground, and hook the other two on the side of my harness as I'm going up, so that the second stick I have in my hands, the third and fourth stick I have on my belt. And this is, I'm trying to go at this like if I was by myself. If I have a cameraman, I just make sure I have the rope tied and they tie everything as I'm climbing.
Yep.
So I don't have to climb with them. But if I'm by myself, I try to minimize the times I have to go up and down the tree, hopefully only once. But having some type of system where you can hook the climbing sticks on the side of your safety harness really helps and saves multiple trips up the tree. And then making sure you have easy access to a pruning saw is huge on these hanging hunts. I always keep mine either in my hand warmer or my chest pocket or something where I can really easily get it and cut a little limb off, because as you guys know, there's never the perfect straight tree in the perfect spot. So you're usually having to make adjustments, do trimming, things like that.
So, how long does it typically take you from the base of the base of the tree to get the stand hung and get set, ready to go?
So let's say I'm just using 4 sticks and a stand, and I can just go up with the stand tied onto a rope. So once I get those 4 sticks up, I'm pulling the stand up. Not not taking into account of all the camera gear and everything, I would say I can do a hang and hunt pretty reasonably in 15 minutes. Just the hanging of the sticks in the stand.
Yep. That's pretty good.
But,
I mean, and you've had a lot of practice at that too.
Yeah, I've had a lot of practice, but as we talked about earlier, like what Justin alluded to, all the time is in finding the tree. It's not necessarily in the hanging. And of course, there's situations where you get up there and there's a knot in the tree or some type of crooked bend, and it ends up taking 3 times as long as it should have. But in general, the actual hanging is the part that usually goes the quickest.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things too. You could be on a piece where I found myself on a piece that I've never really set foot on, and I've looked at an area and I'm like, I want to get in this area. And it's kind of intimidating in a way, and it's like, man, I've never been in there before. I don't know what I'm going to get into. Do I really want to go do this hang and hunt thing, or do I want to go in there and scope it out and do a preset or pre-hung, stand? And it's kind of intimidating to think about, but I really want to dive into it, and that's why I wanted to have you on. I wanted to get your system and figure out what you do, because I know you've done it a lot for many years and very successful at it. Because one of my biggest things on one of my farms here in Michigan is it's a small farm. Acreage wise, it's decent. It's 120 acres, but there's only 4 acres of timber, and it's broke up. I have 1 acre section and I have a 3 acre section, and I have some pre-hungs in there. And the reason why I do that is because I just want to ease in there. I mean, it's hard when there's small sections because there could be deer in there, and I've actually set them up with some TSI and hinge cutting and everything where I can actually get into stands with deer within 40, 50 yards of me and not get boogered, So it's hard for me to wrap my head around doing a hang and hunt when I got a scenario like that. Now, with a scenario like that, what do you recommend if I do a hang and hunt to try to get in there quickly and quietly and efficient?
I guess, what are you asking? You as far as instead of the preset?
Yeah, so if I wanted to, instead of doing a preset, because my biggest downfall is I don't want to be on the farm. I want to keep the pressure off as much as I can. So even in the summer, just saying, okay, I'm not putting any stands up, but I know where the areas I need to be in. So if I, these smaller acreage pieces of woods, how would you approach them to do a hang and hunt, knowing that there could be deer within 50 to 100 yards of you?
Yeah, well, at least knowing the area you want to be in, you're already at an advantage. And if you know the tree you want to be in, even if you don't have a preset stand there, that's another big step. Like I said, that's always the biggest challenge. You're gambling if you don't know the area. You're gambling if there's a tree in the right spot. So if you know those 2 things, it's as simple as creating a safe access route, going in and going out from that. That the actual hanging, it's going to be the same no matter where you're at. But if you have a good access route, you know where you need to go. Most of the hard work's taken out of the equation already.
Yep. And that's, like I said, that's one thing I'm just trying to fight with myself, but I want to get into it because the trade-off is I'm not on the farm as much, if at all, in the summer doing things that you always get curious, and it's like, oh, what's going on with the farm, and I want to be there, and you have this farm, and it's like I want to enjoy it, but it's like, don't go in there, stay disciplined and stay off it. So that's kind of
that's tough.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Because we enjoy more than just the harvest or the kill. We just love spending time on the lands, and even though we know it does damage, I still find myself just going out there, looking at trees, looking at the terrain, stuff like that. But it is tough when you know in the back of your head you shouldn't be there, and you're doing yourself no good when it comes to the actual hunt.
Yep, and you're always trying to tweak things too. It's like, man, I saw a lot of deer in this area last year. I want to go in and kind of see why they're using the terrain there or why they're coming through there. So it's always like, and that's just more added pressure on your farm.
Yeah. It's a trade-off though, because you do learn. That's the best way to learn is boots on the ground. Yep.
So for anybody out there that wants to get into the hang and hunt, what do you recommend as far as gear? And now, maybe it's not a specific brand, but maybe as far as functionality, and ease of use, like what are the things that you look for in, stand and sticks climbing method, that people should be looking to get into?
I would look for something that is packable. So the sticks somehow go attached to the stand, whether that's on the post or on the platform, and then having backpack straps on the stand, of course. I think just that packability is huge. So I would look for some type of set that goes together, whether that's the same brand or if you can make, cross brands work. I'm not sure, but I would just look for something that packs together. That'll make a huge difference in the ease of actually doing this. And one other thing I wanted to touch on before, we stopped talking about this hang and hunt thing. We talk about how effective it is, and there's no doubt I would recommend people try it, but the safety thing is the number one thing that people really need to keep in mind if you start trying this. If you're hanging a stand every single hunt, you're increasing your odds of something happening. So just be very, very vigilant and wearing a harness, using your lineman's rope, all that type of stuff. Because if you're not going to a stand that already has a safe line and steps and everything like that, you're adding to the danger of falling. So just be very, very cautious of that if you start getting into the hang and hunt situation more often.
I think you almost need that lineman belt to hang those sticks.
For sure you do. But even climbing,
that's what I'm saying. Even climbing up and just being able to set your stick and then lean back out of your harness, having two hands to work with as you're getting up in the tree and setting the stand. Instead of one-handing it, trying to swing the strap around, catch it, get it hooked on.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider that for multiple reasons, but primarily safety. It's just there's no doubt you're increasing the odds of something happening by doing this type of hunting. Yeah,
and the tree harness companies are, safety harness, they're making it too easy to be safe. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean now? Like, it's just too easy. It's
there's no excuse.
There's no excuse. And, we were talking before we started recording, you and I have, little kids, and Justin's got dogs he's got to worry about too. And, you want to come home safe to your family and your friends and everything. And, you're not only hurting yourself, but you're hurting the people around you as well. And you really need to take precautions. And because there's times where I go to stands and it's like, you're running late. Everybody runs late, and you always feel like you're rushed in the fall, and it's like, get there and just take every precaution you can and just be safe with that. That's a good point.
Yeah, there's no deer in the world that's worth something happening to either you or your family as a repercussion. I just want to make sure we hit on that. We're talking about all the little stuff. None of that matters until you're safe first. So. Just want to make sure we touch on that.
Definitely, man. That's a good point. Great point, actually. So, hang and hunts, I've covered basically everything I think I want to cover. There's another thing I want to ask you about, and basically, how was your season this year?
It was good. It was kind of a crazy year based on, just personal stuff of moving and finding new properties, and it was one of the most challenging seasons I've experienced in a while, and those are sometimes the seasons where you kill a really big deer, and that was the case with me this year. I killed a good buck in mid-November, and some of those hard-earned ones feel the best, and that was the case with this one.
Yeah, what was the scenario? Can you break that hunt down for us? Was it a hang and hunt, or was it a pre-hung to stand?
It was a hang and hunt, but it was my second time in that particular tree. I'd hunted it once before, a couple weeks before the day I actually killed, but I went back to it. I took two stands again on November 11th, so it was a hang and hunt, but it was my second time in that actual tree. It was just a tree that I knew was in the right spot, and I knew there's potential there. It wasn't like I knew of this specific deer or any specific deer for that matter. I just knew it was a good spot and had the potential to produce a good deer, and it was one of those nights where everything worked out. This buck came out following some does or got on some does trails a few hundred yards away, and he was in the right mood, and I was able to rattle him in from right around 250 yards away into 28 is what the shot was. And it was just, it was one of those nights where everything came together. The camera angles, the footage, all that stuff. It was pretty awesome.
That's fun. And that's what makes, that's the dessert that we get as hunters. Everybody wants to kill a deer and everything, but to me, it's great doing that. But it's the dessert on the cake, and I love everything else about it. And like you said, everything was perfect. The camera angles, the way the deer acted, and the shot placement and ethical kill and being safe as well. And when a plan comes together, it doesn't feel any better than that.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it was one of those times where the season just changed on a dime. It was actually the first shooter I had seen all year, and that, for as hard as I hunt and some of the properties I've hunted in the past, for me to go all the way up until November 11th without even laying eyes on a shooter, it was kind of crazy, but that's just how the season was playing out. I was trying to figure out new properties. My farm had completely flooded, so all the deer moved off of that, so I was hunting different areas. But the first shooter I'd seen all season happened to be the one that I was able to call in and kill.
Love it when a plan comes together.
That's not very often.
Yeah, doesn't happen very often at all, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like it happens more often to you than most people, because I got George Brett within arm's reach of me to my right, and I can look over my left shoulder and see Twinkie back from the younger days of Jared Mills, and the 186 we talked about earlier. And I recognize the other two. I just don't know what they're called.
It's cool to see, like, if you go through that, all the first time in sits, and 3 out of the 4 that we're looking at right there were first time in, and the other one I think was second time in. So it's the proof's in the pudding. That's topic that we've been talking about all evening.
Yeah, it's really got me thinking, and and I definitely want to get into it, but it also I need the right gear to do it as well. I just don't want to go in there with a clunky, big old clunky tree stand that's heavier and heck, and that's half the battle, is having the right tools. Like a carpenter, you got to have the right tools to make to have the product that the best product you can to build the best thing. Yeah,
to add on to that, we kind of went off the topic when you asked me that question. I said something that packs together from the sticks and the stand, but from the stand perspective, having something easy to hang is huge. Something that has the post loops on it that you're not trying to feed straps through or anything like that is a huge time saver. Something that's easy to hang, something that you can adjust how level the platform is and the seat is. Those are some other little things that I would recommend looking into when it comes to this hang and hunt equipment.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree. And we use some Millennium tree stands, and they've got a cool system with the receiver that you put on the tree, but the only bad thing with that is it's got a ratchet strap, so you're making noise doing that as well. So it's nice to be able to have like the Muddy system or the Versa button system where it's just like a pull tight strap and go from there as well. Back to Justin was talking about George Brett. Now, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I'm sure you are, knowing who George Brett is, and I name a lot of my deer, but the George Brett story, I followed that, when it was happening, and that was an unbelievable story. And that deer, honestly, is kind of a legend around, around the industry and, people that have watched Midwest Whitetail, I'm sure. But let's dive into that a little bit. I want to know a little more about that deer and the story with him, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the cool ones to talk about. I wish it would have ended a different way, but it's all about the stories, and that's why we do what we do. That's my favorite part of this. George Brett, well, kind of going with your baseball reference, how he got his name. When I first saw him, he was a 4-year-old 8-pointer, a big 8-pointer, like mid-150s. But it looked like he had pine tar from the bases of his antlers all the way up almost to his G2s. It just looked like pine tar, and for those baseball fans out there, I'm sure you get the connection. So that's where his name came from. I actually hunted him as a 4-year-old, and typically I try to target deer when they're 5 and older, but I was pretty sure this deer was 4, but he was a mainframe 8, super clean 8. He did have a drop tine, but good tine length, no signs of throwing up G4s, really good mass. And I had never seen a deer like that make a giant jump 4 to 5. I remember talking to multiple people trying to decide if I should hunt the deer or not. And I decided that I'm going to try to hunt him throughout the bow season. If he makes it to the gun seasons, I'm going to try to get him to 5.5. And that's what happened. But I learned a lot about that deer, that 4-year-old deer, targeting him. And speaking of the hanging hunts, I jumped all over the place with that deer. I would see him make an adjustment, just all kind. It would be pretty funny if I took a map and put all the little spots I tried hunting him and where I encountered him, because it looked like someone threw a bunch of pins on a map just randomly. It was just, I was popping all over the place. And the farm I was hunting him on was pretty homogeneous. There wasn't a lot of things that forced their movement. So, I that kind of led to jumping all over the place and trying to get lucky a little bit. But George Brett was a deer that I learned so much hunting. He acted different than any other bucks I'd hunted in the past. He had a different personality. And it's funny because everyone that knows George Brett remembers him because of the fight that I filmed. And that was his 4-year-old deer, that year that I was hunting him. And you think of watching that fight and you think, man, that's an aggressive buck. But in reality, he was the exact opposite. He was very, very timid. Did not respond to calls. He happened to be, in the right moment, fighting for a hot doe that time when I filmed him. But you could tell. I have a lot of trail cam videos of him. Every scrape he approached was with caution, and not because I had left a bunch of scent there, and that's why he was cautious. Every other buck would come in there and just tear it up. He just had that kind of cautious personality, timid personality. You could see it all the way from the summer all the way through the season. He just was not an aggressive deer. And so I learned a lot about that, and learned that taught me a lot about the individuality of these bucks and how they all have their own personalities. So kind of fast forwarding, he made it through the year. We found his sheds. And as a 5.5-year-old, it took him quite a while to get back on the farm. I had a buddy that was hunting a neighboring farm, and he had quite a few pictures of him in September and October, but he slowly but surely made his way back over. And he adjusted his core area a little bit. I'm not sure if he kicked another buck out or just kind of shifted it. But he was tough to hunt that 5.5-year-old year, and I did have quite a few pictures of him. But the only time I actually saw him on the hoof was walking in. Had stands and sticks going to do a hanging hunt close to where I filmed him fighting the year before. And he was running across multiple ridges, chasing a doe as hard as he possibly could. He was veering off, trying to run this other buck off, but still trying to keep up with the doe. Unfortunately, we didn't get any footage of him. He was probably 100 yards up above us. We were down in the bottom, looking up at him running across the tops of these ridges. And that was the last time I saw him in person or on camera. He completely went off the radar. My buddy that was a neighbor wasn't getting pictures of him. And deep down, I knew something had happened to him. I just didn't know what. And my season, I kind of dedicated that deer. So I wasn't sure whether I should give up because I wasn't getting pictures of him, or just, hoping that he was somehow avoiding the cameras and I was eventually going to catch up with him. I kept hunting where I believed was his core area, never saw him. And fast forward to February the following year, I found him dead right in the middle of his core area. He was dead against a fence. I have no idea how he died, if another hunter had hit him, if he died in a fight. I have no idea. He was basically just a skeleton when I found him. So, like I said earlier, not the way you want that story to end. But it was cool to have closure. It was cool that I was the one that found him. And just a really cool deer that I learned so much from. And as we all can agree, it's all about the hunt, the story, and what you can learn from it. And he was a pretty special deer as far as the hunt goes.
Yeah. What kind of jump did he make from a 4 to 5-year-old as far as antler size goes?
So I think I scored his sheds right around 154 as a 4-year-old 8. And he made a jump into a full-blown 10, long 4s. He scored right at one. He's 180 and 5/8 as a 5-year-old. So
Wow.
He put on over 25 inches. And like I said, I had never seen a deer make usually when they're going to blow into a full blown 10 with long G4s, usually see some type of Nicker G4s the year before or something.
Yep.
He had no sign of that, and I just assumed he'd be another, because he was a 3-year-old 8, 4-year-old 8, and then a 5-year-old full blown 10. So I was amazed at the jump he made. But he was going to be. It was a George Brett or bust season for me, regardless of that jump. I just had too much cool history with him as a 4-year-old for him to not be my main target.
Yeah, that's crazy. And like you said with the stories, it's that's what we live for. And this year I was hunting a deer, and definitely not the caliber of George Brett, but he was a 4-year-old. And around my area, it's hard for us to get deer to 4 years old. And I've known about this deer for 3 years and hunted him hard for 2 years. And as a 3-year-old, I only saw him one time, had him on camera, and he disappeared. And saw him bedded with a doe, locked down with a doe on the rut from the road. And then I'm like, for sure this deer's somebody's gonna kill him with a gun. And he never did. This year, summer showed up, with beans on and velvet and everything. He was the first deer that showed up, and he was bigger. Same rack. He's never grown a right side. It's always been like a big spike with a split, but his left side's always been like a good 4-point side. And I went in this year in the morning, early that morning that I felt like I bumped that doe, and he came by at 18 yards, and I shot him and hit him high and tracked him for 2 days and never found him. Tracked him to the only standing cornfield on our farm, and or even in the area, and never found him. Fast forward, saw him 2 more times with a gun, couldn't get on him, and then I had neighbors that were passing him up because, with a deer that's only got one side, not a lot of a lot of people look at it and it's like, oh, that's not a very good deer. But
yeah,
I have a lot of neighbors that aren't like real big diehard hunters, and I don't think they know a lot about, the age structure of a deer and everything, and how he's kind of a unicorn in our area as far as age goes, which was fine. Yeah. But they passed him up. 3 guys passed him up with a gun in one day, and he was very visible. Like, as a 3-year-old, he was not visible. As a 4-year-old, he was all over. And I'm like, this deer is going to get shot. I know he is. I ended up kicking him up out of his bed one morning, doing something I shouldn't have been doing. I was getting curious, and trying to figure out, trying to get in a little more aggressive, and I ended up getting too close to him. And he ended up getting hit by a car and dying by a car. And it was 300 yards north of his court area, and coming across the road and got hit by a car. And my brother-in-law, he runs he's a part owner in a dairy farm here, and it's his dairy farm. Land is all around this farm, and he was hauling manure one morning, and he calls me. He's like, I named the deer Jim Abbott, baseball fan, and he had a weak one side and a good other side, so his name was Jim Abbott. And he's like, Jim's in the ditch right here, and he's done for. And I said, no way. And he goes, yeah, he got hit by a car. Well, he took a picture of it and sent it to me, and I was going to leave work, but it was going to be a long excursion. I would have drove an hour one way just to, go get him. And so I'm like, well, I'll go get him that night. And I called the DNR, got the salvage tag, did everything that, I wanted. I wanted to go and give this deer closure. I wanted to respect him the way that I felt like he should be respected. And I was going to, get a nice European mount of him. I wanted to do everything I could. And by the time I got there that night, somebody had already cut his antlers off.
Oh, man.
So I didn't even get to touch his antlers.
That's a bummer. Yeah, that's what's tough, is there's so many ways these deer can die. You could have 1,000 acres and think that you're doing the right thing by passing these deer up, and you're just going to wait till he's 5 and hunt him, or 4 and hunt him, and it just doesn't work like that. There's just so many ways these deer can die, whether it be a neighbor or a car or a fight, or you just see it so many times that you're taking a big risk every time you pass a deer.
Yeah, and it's crazy how intimate you kind of get with these deer, and it sounds like all 3 of us are the same way. I like to name deer. That's just how I identify them, and I like to build stories with them, and that's just part of the story for me. And once he died and I had closure, it was almost like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Like I didn't have to. It sucked because I wanted him to get through, and I wanted to see him next year. But it was like, man, like that was like, you can even ask my wife. Like I thought about that deer all the time, every day. I wonder what wonder what Jim's doing. Kind of thing. You know what I mean? It sounds weird, but that's just.
I wonder if he thinks about me too.
Exactly, but still, I mean that maybe I'm just weird like that.
Yeah, it is weird when you step back and think about it. There's no way to explain it to someone that doesn't understand. That's for sure.
Yep.
No, and as producers, it's the emotional investment we have in our subjects, and that's why we do what we do. Like two perfect examples, George Brett and Jim Abbott. It just proves you don't need to kill him yourself, to bring that story to life. Like it's going to end somehow. You want it to be with your arrow, but if it doesn't, you still have the whole story except for the fact of pulling the trigger. I mean, like Jared said, everybody knows George Brett for being in that fight in the river that day, and for you, I mean, what's the story for me that sticks out the most with you and Jim is the day you pushed your luck and bumped him out, and you're like, that's it, it's over, he's gone, and then he gets hit by a car.
Yep.
After having been shot, you shot him once, and he got shot with a gun.
Yeah. A neighbor shot him too. Shot him and grazed his back with a gun. I mean, he was a warrior, and
that's crazy.
I was going to say it's a testament to the commitment we have to the story. It's not just about going out and filming these animals die, and trying to play the chess game and outsmart these animals. It's that's the story we choose to tell, and it's more than just the kill.
Yeah, and we love the stories, and people may look down on us for naming deer or targeting specific deer, but really it just comes down to being so passionate about something, and that's where we're at. It eats us up. We eat, sleep, breathe it, and I feel bad for the people that aren't passionate about something out there, whether it's hunting or not. I think just having something that you live for just really makes things more enjoyable, whatever that may be. And for us, it's whitetails and these stories that we're chasing.
I agree, man. You couldn't have said any better. I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover. I mean, you guys have any closing thoughts or anything on that end?
I appreciate you guys having me. This was fun, and like I said earlier, our original topic of hanging and hunting, I'm a huge believer in it. It's I've heard way too many stories, and I've had too many personal experiences to know it's not coincidence that your first time in and second time in are super effective. Just be smart in the way you do it, be safe in the way you do it, but I'm a huge believer in how well it works.
Yeah, and for all these stories that we've been talking about, George Brett and the 186 we were talking about, Jared, can you direct people that are listening to this to kind of where they can go to see all this content that you're doing and kind of follow what you and Midwest Whitetail are doing?
Yeah, so the MidwestWhitetail.com has all these videos. You can look at all the archive and go way back all the way to 2008 and watch all these hunts. But also one of our growing platforms is on YouTube. So we have a main Midwest Whitetail YouTube channel, and then the one that's really growing is Midwest Whitetail Daily on YouTube. And this is where we post our almost everyday blogs. So every hunt, whether it's successful or not, gets posted on there. As we're moving into the off season here, all the little projects we do and scouting we do and all that stuff will just get posted. And it's very just raw, real content, not overly edited, anything like that. But people like to go along and learn with us and see whether we do right or wrong or the mistakes we make and learn from that too. So Midwest Whitetail Daily on YouTube is a good spot to follow that.
Awesome.
It's all available too on streaming devices, Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire.
Yep, and then also the mobile devices too, so Android and iOS.
Yep, and that's when you add those channels, it's under Whitetail TV.
Whitetail TV, yep.
And the same with the mobile app on Android and iOS. It's all free. You can download the app or just add the channel to your streaming devices.
and I highly recommend all that stuff. I watch it a lot. Today I had it on in the office and just in the background, and you guys are doing great stuff. And again, Jared, I appreciate you coming on and doing this, and maybe we'll have to do this again for sure.
Yeah, anytime. I'd be happy to come and do it again. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, and you guys have a good night.